Welcome to Dream by Design with Melissa Banks, where women share their dreams, struggles, and successes. How they were able to persevere despite the fear and create the life they want and deserve. If you're looking for inspiration to move you past where you normally would stop, then this is the show for you. Here's your host, Melissa Banks.
Welcome to Dream by Design with Melissa Banks. I'm excited you could be with us today. I'm your host, Melissa Banks. Today, we continue our Women Who Write series where we're featuring some amazing women who share their journey with us and how they were able to keep going despite the circumstances. Our guest today is author and entrepreneur, Patrece D. Johnson. Thank you, Patrece, for joining us today.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you today. So first of all, let me just say congratulations on your first book, The Beauty to Being Restored. It's an exciting book. So tell us, did you ever think you would be a writer, or is this something you dreamed about?
Well, I'm going to tell you honestly, I had to think back. Years ago because some things happen with us. And, and they come from things that happen in childhood, and we really don't pay attention to those things. But as a young girl, I always used to just write letters. There were times that I would not really, were able to pretty much articulate things or had the time to say the things I wanted to say to people. And so people who meant a lot to me, like, in your childhood years, you had your friends, your close friends, your friend girls, and even your little boyfriends, right? And so I used to always write a lot of letters, but that to actually be honest and to think that one day those letters would make me become an author today, no, I did not think that. I just liked writing the letters. That's really what's so amazing about it, Patrece, is we have dreams and we go through life, and sometimes we just don't we don't think about the stepping stones to somewhere else we're going to be. So we have dreams that take us into one direction, but, I always say that my heart didn't even know the dream that God dreams it for me. And that's how I kind of look at a lot of things that happen as well as being an author and a whole lot of other things that came into my life, and that's how I see it as well. So let's talk about The Beauty to Being Restored and your inspiration behind writing it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I just really want to say, first of all, thank you, because you all's platform is absolutely amazing. It really, really is, just to bring this light and shed the light on so many of the women, because we write, it just comes to find out that we're writing from places, like you said, that just have been birthing us all along. And I've got to say what spearheaded this for me, this book was written on its own, I would have to say, because this came at a time when I was just simply writing my thoughts out to God. I was just really writing down the things that I saw were so pivotal because of something that I had experienced in my life. I had just gone through coming out of one of the most toxic relationships that I had ever been out of. And at that point in my life, I was really going into a place of needing to find out my identity, find out where I lost Patrece. And that is where this book was birthed. It was booked. This book was actually just came about in a place in my life when I was walking through the restoration myself. I was actually just walking through it and didn't know that it was going to be a book when I got through. Like I said, it was just me having conversations with God and being true to myself and asking myself certain questions and just dealing with the reality and trying to find out my reason for why I made a lot of the choices that I made. And that's where this book came about, Melissa.
Wow. One of the things, Patrece, I noticed when I was reading the book, and one of the things I like about it, and I just want you to talk about that a little bit, is each day where you give the knowledge, you give the inspiration, but you end it with a very short, powerful, straight-in-your-face call to action. So why was that important to you to make sure, like one of the just comes to mind is you talked about just do it. But at the end of that, you were just straight. Now, what is it that you must do? Write it down. Now, guess what? Do it now. So why was that so important to you to make sure you gave a short, straightforward call to action?
Because one thing that I found during this time was I needed to face my truths. And it's one thing to be aware of those truths, but it's another thing to do something about them. And so what I found was most important, and what I wanted any of my readers to read about this book, that one specifically, that chapter was solely, Melissa, to not just think about it, but to then bring it forward in the natural realm for yourself. Like really put pen to paper, put thought into it, move in that direction. Now that you've gotten that reality check, now what's next? What are you going to do to actually make that thing be executed in your life? And so it was the book was important to have that to be done so that people can actually move into that place of restoration, do the actions that were required to make that place of restoration happen.
Wow, that's wonderful. If you're just joining us today, you're listening to Dream by Design with Melissa Banks. Our guest today is author and entrepreneur Patrece D. Johnson. So, Patrece, tell me, how has your journey, we talked about that a little bit at the beginning, but how has your journey prepared you to be where you are right now? We go through a lot of things and we don't know where it's leading us, but how have you been prepared for this an amazing career as a great entrepreneur, have this book out that's helping anyone who picks it up, but specifically women? I think about women because that's where we focus here on this show. But how has your journey prepared you for now?
Okay, so, oh, gosh, you kind of answered the question with the question. The journey itself is the preparation. And a lot of times we don't even realize that because sometimes it can seem so unorthodox, or it can seem very chaotic, or different levels of adaptation and adjustment. And so you're not thinking that it has anything to do with an end. As a matter of fact, you actually think that it's a lot of interruptions. And so what you find is that my journey just really helped to cultivate the gift that God had for me all along. Like, I felt that God knew that I was able with him to handle it, to go through it, and that he knew that through all of that pain, through everything that I went through, that at the end, I like the symbol that he speaks to me quite often through, which is on the front of my book, is the butterfly. And it is the transformation, understanding that many times in life we're going through some ugly things, just as the butterfly does. At the beginning, it's this creeper crawler thing, right, this caterpillar. And then it goes through this cocoon stage where it actually looks like it's dying, like it's dead. And then all of a sudden, out of the shell of which it has to go through that struggle itself, it forms into something that is so amazingly, admirably beautiful to look at. And that's what I felt. I felt that, to believe that. And I just knew that, I always knew that there was something to me. And most of us do. Most of us have that inkling of thinking there is something to us. There's something different about us. And it is. Each one of us have a particular gift. And God wants to cultivate it, and his ways are not ours. And so once we just make the decision to not give up and keep going, and with that, we see that there is something beautiful at the end. And so I would have to say that the journey itself, when you keep going, actually cultivates the gift.
Wow, thank you for that. And you actually touched on what I was going to ask you next, so I thank you for going ahead. And I was going to go to the butterfly, and I looked over at your book, and I saw the butterfly on the front of it, and I knew it was significant, and I wanted to make sure our audience understood the significance of the butterfly. I often, Patrece, think of the butterfly and think of the cocoon stage, because so many of us can get to a point and we sit. The thoughts might go through our head, the life happens, and we're sitting in that one space waiting on something to happen. And until we develop, until we break out of that cocoon, we can't get to where we're supposed to be. And I just think about that when I see the butterfly, and I thank you for sharing that with our audience.
Yeah,
so as you're reading, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of just touch on this. This is something that came to me because the question you had also asked me kind of makes me think about stamina, things that just keep you going. So there was a time in my life that God began to bring to me the bamboo tree. And anyone that knows the story, just read the story about the bamboo tree. If you ever want to just have this stick-to-itiveness, if you just want to keep going in the midst of it all, just study the bamboo tree, the planting of it. For 5 years, nothing breaks ground. And automatically in 5 years, when you keep watering, though, you have to keep watering. And to keep watering, can you imagine watering something that doesn't break ground for 5 years? Can you just imagine what people are saying? So in the midst of all of this, and you're going through it, just like the butterfly, there are so many things that are coming at you at the same time, and you have to continue to believe. That's why I said the focus is to keep going and to understand the stages that we have to go through, and that we will never really understand those stages if we don't keep going. And we won't understand those stages if we don't believe that there's something beautiful that's going to happen at the end, which is the butterfly.
Absolutely. I love that. So when your readers, Patrece, pick up this book and they begin to read it, what is it that you want them to walk away with?
Oh, my gosh, is the power in being restored. Because when you get to that place of restoration happening, first of all, to understand that it's there for you, that restoration is there for you, that is, as long as there's a God, restoration is there for you. That's the first thing to understand. And to know that there's beauty in that restoration, because a lot of times people are, when we go through something, we tend to think that we have to have our heads held down. We have to, be down about it, instead of looking at it as something that is about to be absolutely amazing. And that there is beauty in the process of you being restored. Because when something is being restored, think about an old piece of furniture. In the process of actually restoring that piece of furniture, you begin to see the life that comes back into it, or even somebody being poured into. You know how you speak positive words over somebody. You can just tell somebody who has not been poured into. And the very moment you start seeing them hold their head up, you start seeing their eyes glisten, you start seeing their eyes look at you, you start seeing the life come back in them. That's what starts happening when you start being restored. So I want everybody to understand that the restoration process is available. It's available to everybody who's gone through something or who's going through something, that there's beauty in that process of being restored. Because most people think that when they've gone through something, they just discard themselves, or they feel that it's too late, or there's nothing else that can happen after that. But you can be restored, and there's beauty in that.
Oh, wow. That was awesome. So let's talk about being a female author, a female entrepreneur. What challenges specifically to being a female entrepreneur? Because I know you've had your business for a long time, but what challenges can you share with us that you had to face, and then how did you overcome those challenges?
Wow. Well, challenges. I would have to say my greatest challenge was believing that I could do it. Was the first challenge, was believing that what I had to share was that it was something that somebody needed, and also believing that I didn't have to be perfect. That was very important, because I believe that as female, as a female, we tend to look at that. We tend to look at certain things having to be a certain way, and so I just felt that had I stayed in that place of thinking that things had to be perfect, that it had to be perfectly laid out or a certain way, it would have kept me from releasing this book. And I'm thankful for my coach in helping me to do that, to work through that process.
Absolutely, because it takes courage, first of all, to say, I went through these things, and then it takes courage to write your thoughts down. So it's important. You said something about I'm thankful for my coach. So I believe that it's important who you talk to, who you have in your environment. I talk about that often, is who pours into you and who you pour into, because that can move you or that can stop you. So I'm grateful for your coach that you were able to put out such an inspiration to all of us, and each of our readers that are listening will be inspired to look at themselves as they go through this book. And I believe that that's the process, is look at yourself and how can you do it, and then move you to action, which is oftentimes where we drop the ball. So Patrece, when you're having your moment, though, you know, we as entrepreneurs and authors, we do a lot of things. We wear a lot of hats. Sometimes lots of great things are happening right behind the other, and they become overwhelming. Or maybe it's a time where you're working really, really hard, but nothing is happening. You're not having the success that you want, but you're working hard every single day. What do you do? How do you get through those moments?
Oh, that is so good. Oh, Melissa, that's so good. Okay, so to some people this may sound a little redundant, but I want to challenge you to have an ear to hear. And because a lot of us deal with that. And I'm going to say for me, because you do have those times, sometimes you want to throw the glass up against the wall. You know, you're just really frustrated. For me, I would have to say it's the point of breaking where you have to go through that process even. That process is even important because it's like at that point, that's when you just release it and say, okay, God, you got to have this. You got to do this. And then it's like that's what he's waiting for. And the very moment that you get through that level of frustration and tell God, you got to do it or it's not going to get done, or you're going to have to tell me that. And having that Jacob and, you know, Jacob, I'm wrestling with you, or in that David, and I'm going to dance until my clothes come off. When you're going before him, and that's a place that has taken me to keep going, to those places of where I won't give up. I have, and I won't give in. That's the part. There's no other way, because every time that I've done that, Melissa, he comes and brings an answer. And he, of course, today he did it again for me. He did it again just today before this call. So it's that. You've got to get to that point to where you're saying, to where you can get it out of your mouth. God, you're going to have to do this. And your frustration has got to be because you're tired of you. I can't see it. I can't find it. And it's got to get to the point of when you say, okay, God, tell me. Because that's what he's wanting. And that's the part when I realize, okay. But sometimes we have to be quickened, and that's the only way we can be quickened is to know that we've got to bring it to him. And sometimes if we're not still enough, the only way that he knows that we'll get it is through that level of frustration. And we've got to get to that wall to where we say, okay, God, you got this thing. You got to have it. And when we give it to him, he always shows us the way.
Oh, absolutely. That is so good. Now, Patrece, I want you to take a moment right here and just share with our audience. You know, our audience is the people that are listening right now. There's someone that's listening that have a book in their heart. They have a desire to write it. They have gone through some things and they're coming out of it, and it's time to share their story, but they just can't do it. What advice would you give them to just be able to start on that book?
The first thing is to acknowledge that you have a lot of noise. A lot of noise around you. That's the first thing. You got to acknowledge you can't change something you're not willing to confront. And so if you don't even know that it exists, you can't confront it. And so that is acknowledging the noise, that you have some noise. And the noise can simply be in your head. It can simply be all of your thoughts pulling at you, your family even, or just children, just whatever. Just your thoughts itself can be overwhelming. It is getting to the place to where you have to just stop and just say, you know what? I got to let everything else go, and I'm going to take this time right here and actually set a time for yourself and say, you know what, I'm going to block out this, and I'm just going to write. I'm going to release this stuff. It's like a release. You got to release it out of you, because your frustration is because there's so much inside of you. There's so much inside of you that you've got to let out, and it's only going to come out through that pen and paper or through you typing it, whatever format that you use to release your words. But you've got to do that. So it is drowning out the noise. It's getting rid of the noise. It may look like you're going into a closet, closing that door. It may look like you're going into a bathroom and just writing. It may look like you pacing the floor and just writing. It may look like you just shutting everything off in your home and just writing. It may look like you getting in your car, driving to a place of solitude away from your family, being in your car and just writing. or just may like you, not instead of writing, you may just have to record yourself. And there's so many digital tools that we can use where you record yourself and it would turn it into a text for you. So sometimes it's just talking it out. So those are some of the different methods that I would suggest to break through.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for being here today. You have uplifted and inspired us all to just go for it. Basically, that's what it all means. Is just break it all down, just go for it. So thank you so much for sharing your journey, sharing your beautiful book, The Beauty to Being Restored, with our audience today. Now, Patrece, just tell our audience how they can stay connected with you, how they can get your book.
Okay. And I'm so excited to do this. I want to say thank you both. Thank you so much. I've got to say for having me, Melissa, in sharing this opportunity to do so. And I want to encourage everyone that's listening to allow the thoughts of areas in which you need to multiply in your life to come to life by releasing your words. And you can go to PatreceDJohnson.com to get the book. PatreceDJohnson.com, and that's Patrece with an E, not an I.
Well, thank you again, Patrece, for being here today. And thank you to our audience for tuning in to today's edition of Dream by Design with Melissa Banks. I'm your host, Melissa Banks, saying all your dreams are possible. Believe in yourself, work hard, and don't quit. Until next time, thank you for choosing Dream by Design with Melissa Banks. Enjoy your day.